Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and you are on to Inside Sources. And here is my take for today. I will be continuing the take on illustrious Nigerians that shaped 2025 at the next edition. Today we are focusing on Trump's capture of Maduro and something about Nigeria and Nigerians. Last Saturday, January 3, 2026, United States military forces acting under the orders of President Donald Trump arrested and placed into custody in New York the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro Moros. Only days earlier, on Christmas Day 2025, that was last year, the U.S. also launched Tomahawk missiles into Nigeria, targeting terrorists, especially in the northwest, in that attack. About the same period, Trump renewed his call for the United States to annex Greenland. At first glance, these actions may appear disconnected: an arrest in Venezuela, missile strike in Nigeria, and renewed imperial rhetoric over the Arctic. But Trump's public justifications range from drug trafficking and Christian genocide to strategic defense concern. But once Venezuela president was captured, Trump couldn't hide his intentions any longer. He said very clearly that the Americans were going for Venezuelan oil. He made that openly clear. So, the underlying logic binding these actions together seems to be the United States global economic financial empire, an attempt to halt what looks like a structural decline in the United States. Certainly, Trump, more than many of his predecessors, that is, American president, recognized that potential decline. In my view, his aggressive foreign policy posture is an attempt to arrest what many see as the decline of the American empire. Venezuela has long been in Washington's crosshairs because of its vast resources of crude oil and rare earth minerals, critical for the long-run survival of the American economy. The U.S. petroleum reserves are diminishing, while access to rare earth minerals is indispensable for advanced technology and defense systems. But more troubling for Washington is Caracas' decision to diversify its oil sales away from the American dollar towards the Chinese yuan. Let us pay attention also, because Nigeria occupies a similar strategic position in the calculation of the Americans. Nigeria increasingly is also signaling openness more to the yuan zone, and U.S. intelligence assessment suggests very clearly that Abuja may consider pricing portion of its oil exports outside the dollar, even as the country builds close economic and financial relationships with China, which we can all see clearly. And so Trump's concern for Christian genocide, which I think is genuine and ought to be, also functions as a warning shot across the bow for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and for all of us Nigerians. As the allegation of drug trafficking served as a Trojan horse, it would seem, for the intervention in Venezuela, cases of religious persecution in Nigeria could provide a chance for coercive action against Nigeria should Nigeria move decisively away from the dollar. The question that confronts us today, therefore, is this: is Nigeria prepared for the change of guards in the global monetary and trade systems? As President Bola Ahmed Tinubu put together a brain trust to work out a strategic plan for Nigeria in these changing times? That is the focus of our opening segment today on Inside Sources, right after this. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Like I mentioned in my take, we want to look at some of the more intricate dimension of what the Americans have done in the last week. Part of the issue, like I mentioned there, is some kind of conflict around monetary and trading system globally. To join me in that important conversation today, I have a Nigerian scholar who in 2008, in his PhD dissertation at Princeton University, had written about some of the things that is now unveiling, specifically about how the control of global currency and international trade is at the heart of international politics. I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources Professor Nimi Wariboko, who is the G. Muelder Professor of Ethics, Social Ethics in Boston University, and also the Director of the African Studies Program of that university. Prof, welcome back to Inside Sources.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. Thank you. I'm really grateful.
All right, thank you, Prof. Now, before we go into what you had predicted in that your PhD dissertation, something just broke on the news, and since you are from that state, Rivers State, I'd like to have your comment in a minute or two. The State Assembly in Rivers State, where you hail, has now resumed impeachment proceedings against Governor Fubara, ostensibly on the say-so of the former governor of the state, Nyesom Wike. What's your take, Prof?
Yeah, the news is very disheartening, and it's sad. You know, for those of us that come from Rivers State, I mean, the state has become a joke. I mean, this political tension that they keep generating, the political heat, is not good for the governance and development of the state. I hope that Wike and President Tinubu will try to halt this process, because it doesn't make sense. And the whole political process has become an annoying phenomenon for those of us who are watching it from outside, at least who are not in politics. It has become a mess and a plaything.
Yeah, and hopefully they will sort it out. Yeah. So let's come to our main conversation. During my take, I took the view that what is happening in the U.S., specifically talking about what the U.S. president did to capture, like they said, the president of Venezuela, is part of what seems to be a response to certain games that is going on in the world, Iran economic issues, Iran currency issues, Iran trading system, Iran financial system. Now, you wrote in 2008 your dissertation at Princeton University about God and money, and you had a detailed explanation of these issues. I want you, in opening, to explain to our audience in very simple terms, you know, what that book was, or your dissertation, and how it is beginning to unveil. You know, just to open the discussion very briefly. Prof.
Yes, so what I did in my 2008 book that was published was to lay out how global empires rise and fall. And in identifying the phenomenon or the trend, I clearly stated that global financial system, global monetary and financial system, the trading system, the reserve system is at the heart of global empire, why they rise and they fall. So if you pay attention to the monetary side of empire, you understand how they rose, when they reach maturity, and when they fall. And in that book, I clearly stated that America has reached its maturity point, and China is at the point of taking over as the issuer of global currency of reserve, and also the lender of last resort. But China has not yet stepped into that role. It is waiting appropriately to build up a great military power, because empires also need great military power, and also it's mirroring or copying what the US did. By the end of this First World War, the United States was in a place to be the decider of the global monetary system, but it did not step in. It waited till 1945 or probably 1944 with the Bretton Woods conference. So China is also learning that process, that though it's in a place to issue the global currency of trade and reserve, it has not assumed that role. And the reason it has not assumed that role, there are two things in history, in economies also that you find. One is that for you to play that global role, you need to also have global military presence that can defend countries. China, when I wrote that book over nearly 20 years ago, was not there, and is still not there completely where it wants to be. So that's why China is holding on. And China also knows that once we play that role, it comes with a cost. What they call the trifling dilemma, that once you play that role, eventually your trade surpluses will reduce and you will become a deficit running country, because you need to open up your country, you need to get capital to move, and China doesn't to step into that too soon. But America stepped into that and by 1958, it has started running huge trade deficit. And it could no more support the dollar with gold. So by 1971, Nixon delinked the dollar from gold. So China knows the cost of being the issuer of global currency and the lender of last resort.
Yeah, so I'm sure that a lot of our audience will know what happened, where a good number of our audience, I imagine, we know what happened in the 1971-72 when Nixon struck a deal with the Saudis to ensure that significant portion of the oil sales were denominated in dollar, which then sustained the dollar, up until very lately, in my view. So your contention now, and one of the things that you said in that book is that, the strength of the dollar has since been diminished. And now it seems that what Mr. Trump is doing is to defend that control that America had that seems to be losing out to the Chinese yuan. Can you please explain that to us?
Yes, so what Trump has done, we can look at it in three different buckets. First is that when Nixon struck the deal with the Saudis in the 70s to make every oil sale denominated in dollar, it was a way to sustain the use of the dollar in the global marketplace, right? So Nixon did that, and we have the petrodollar, this thing, that oil, even though it's produced in Saudi Arabia, it's produced in Nigeria, is always priced in dollar. That way, every country has to have access to dollar, have to have a reserve of dollar in order to buy the crucial energy resource of our time. And that is the deal that that they have. And so that is important to understand with that deal. Now, what has happened is that even Saudi Arabia recently announced, and even Venezuela announced that they were going to begin to price some of their oil export in yuan, in the yuan, in the Chinese
currency.
So that threatens Trump and the American empire seriously, and he was not going to sit down there and take it lightly. That is number one. The second bucket is that Trump is also seeing that global reserves have increasingly been moving away from the dollar, because country needs to keep their national savings. That's what central bank reserves mean. The national savings of every country in the world, even the poor Haiti, is kept in dollar in the United States. China saves $3.3 trillion, its national reserve, in the US dollar-denominated assets, right? So now, if countries begin to move away from keeping their reserves in dollar, it's going to weaken the American empire, because I told you monetary power is key to keeping global dominance. So what has happened? So when Saddam, the same thing happened to Saddam. When Saddam threatened that he was going to sell oil in non-dollar currency and also put reserve, America moved and removed him. And there were documents about it in the US Congress. So they moved against him. Libya, Gaddafi also got into a problem because of saying that he was looking for a different currency, a gold-backed currency against the dollar. America moved and removed him. This is important. So that is the second bucket. So if you do anything to affect the reserves status of dollar, they will come after you with all that they got, right? So the third bucket is with China. What is happening with the reserves with China? So China recently issued bonds, government bonds, and it was hugely oversubscribed. But the US Treasury bill is not attracting foreign investors as it used to. So that is an indication that the international economic community has more confidence in the Chinese government and its ability to pay its debt. So China did that as a test run, and it was oversubscribed, even though it offered a lower interest rate on the bond than the US.
When was this, Prof? When did this particular offering happen?
That was last year.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, so now, so that happened. Now, so how does oil reserve and currency linked into China, right? So now we come back. What the attack on Venezuela is actually a strategic attack on China, because one, the oil pricing is going to yuan, and America wants to stop that. Mm-hmm. Two, reserves are going to Chinese currency, and America wants to stop that, so that the Chinese currency will never be the global currency of trade or of reserves. So now, why did he attack Venezuela? Because China 70% of Chinese oil come from Venezuela and Iraq. So if he cripples and takes hold of Venezuela, and he has also threatened Iran, then he will cripple the Chinese economy, because they will not have the energy to operate as they would. So you see what he's doing. So Venezuela is just a facade. He's taking control of that, and he's taking and he has threatened Iran. So the other thing about Iran was also to destabilize Iran, that it will not supply oil. So if you cut off Iranian oil, and if you cut off Venezuelan oil, and if you reach a deal with the Saudi to stay away, China economy would begin to shake, because it needs until they provide alternative sources of energy. So that's what Trump is doing. And why is he also going after Greenland? Because Greenland also have rare earth minerals, right? So and rare earth mineral is very important. America is very dependent on China for rare earth mineral. So all these moves that he's making against Venezuela, against Iran, is all calculated to stop the rise of China and the Chinese currency to the status of global vehicular currency and currency of reserve.
Interesting. So before we look at, in your own perspective, how China might respond, how does this affect Nigeria? Because about the same time that all of this is happening, the US president has also taken significant interest in Nigeria, which by the way, I think that is useful for us because of where we have found ourselves in terms of our poor security architecture. But tell us, how does Nigeria play into this global dynamics of which you have explained?
Because according to the US intelligence sources, Nigeria is also tilting towards the Chinese. Abuja is teaching towards cutting deals with China, getting close to China, allowing China to do some mining. Mm-hmm. And since Trump wants to stop the rise of China, anyone getting close to China becomes a potential target. As he's telling you, can't you understand the game? So in the same way that he used drug trafficking as the Trojan horse to get into Venezuela, he has already raised the issue of Christian genocide. Whether that is true or not,
the different
that is not the issue and focus, but it's an excuse. So he has bombed you first, and the next time, if you don't play game and if you get too close to China, or if you are too close to even France, because America sees France's hand in Africa as something they want to diminish, to take more control, because he has announced he wants to take control of Anglophone at least. So
yeah, they see France's role in Africa, especially West Africa, as some kind of irritation.
Yes, and you know, and our president is very close to the French president, yeah, and with China. So that means, and Nigeria also has oil, and in the midst of all this, know that American oil reserve, even though it's big, is dwindling, and there is no great alternative source, and Trump doesn't want to wait. So people look at oil alone, but it's not only the oil, but with which currency do you trade the oil? Where do you keep your national savings? The fact that every country in the world saves in the United States, keep the national savings, it means that US can print dollar at will to pay for anything. Every other country has to earn resources to earn the dollar to trade, right? So look at America complained that they have trade surpluses with China. But what do you find? Those trade surpluses, the money does not leave America. It's in America, 3.3 trillion, which helps to lower America interest rate generally and finance the American economy. So that is the issue that we need to pay attention. And Trump, more than any other president in recent time, is conscious about arresting the decline of the U.S. dollar empire.
Very interesting. So if I get you very right, you know, and this actually aligns with my own reading of the situation, is that, you know, when you look at history, you know, history is about the rise and fall of empires. So yes, the American empire is the one that is, you know, dominant today. So your argument is that because of the challenge to the dollar in part, and because of the dynamics of energy supplies that you've explained, and few other things, that American empire is under a significant threat. And the attack of Venezuela and the capture of the Venezuelan president by Mr. Trump is because Mr. Trump understands these things and he wants to stop it. That's what you are saying.
Yes, he's playing a long-range game, strategic game. And so what we're seeing is the short moves, you know, like he's moving the pawns, but he's playing a long-range game. Even his tariff addresses the potential decline of the American empire. People say, it's crazy. Why did he impose so much tariff? Initially, he thought he was going to use the tariff to cripple the Chinese economy. It didn't work, right? But so that's what. But why is he so interested in imposing tariff? People look at the tariff, but the real interest is that America manufacturing has dwindled in decades. They've outsourced everything to Asia and other places. And Trump knows history that one of the ways empire collapse is that they abandon manufacturing and go into consumption. And so America is basically a service economy, consuming, and he wanted to reverse that. Because if you look at the Spanish Empire, at the height of it, there's so much gold from Latin America. Money was coming in, productivity, production, manufacturing stopped in Spain, and it basically became a consumption economy. And he knows that kind of recklessness that America have displayed over the years to almost decimate its manufacturing capability, and is in the long run not good for the sustenance of the American dollar empire. That's why he's fighting it through the tariff. He wants to promote more manufacturing. All those things are good, and he might succeed in the long run. But my interpretation of history is that in the long run, in the very long run, when we are not all dead, as kings, contrary to Maynard Keynes, the American empire will be overtaken by the Chinese empire. And that has happened, just like America overtook, took power from the British Empire. But Trump is doing everything to postpone the doomsday. And that is where we need to give him credit. Whether he's doing it in the right way or not, that's a different story. And whether he can balk against history, that's a different story. But Trump is focused on this issue of sustaining the dominance of the dollar and American military power.
Interesting. So back to the Nigerian dimension. You have spoken about the fact that Nigeria is inching towards, the yuan, and I can also confirm that while we were in government and we made a public issue of this, I remember very well that we were trying to see how we can, help in the decline of the value of the naira by doing more business, global business, using the yuan. I remember that at several important meetings, we had asked, the Central Bank was actually asked to go and see how we can get more, yuan-denominated, trading, because we wanted to see how we can halt the devaluation of the naira if we did less of dollar and do more of another currency, because the exchange rate between the naira and the yuan was way better than the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar at that time. But my question to you now is that, so the Americans wouldn't appreciate that at all?
Yeah, Trump doesn't appreciate that because he wants to stop the slide of the dollar in terms of his ability to act as a vehicular currency of trade with any nation in the world, and also as a place where foreign governments keep their reserve, because countries keep their reserves, bulk of it in dollar, but it's been sliding down, and he wants to arrest that, because what happens is that all the savings in the world find their way into America, whether the ones saved in my town in Abonum, River State, or in Ibadan, in Oyo State, will find their way to the US. And people do not understand why. Why am I saying that? Because as long as national reserves of countries, ask Nigeria, where does it keep its reserve? It's in dollar-denominated assets. And that means our savings is coming to support the U.S. Interest. And also banks, when our banks want to buy international bonds or stocks also, in order to keep trading or to even secure their capital or use their own bank reserve for trading, oftentimes they're buying dollar-denominated assets. Dollar-denominated assets dominate the whole global financial system. So if that is the case, America has interest in what any other person does in the world in terms of maintaining the dollar security. Let me give you one example that brings home. At the height of the Iraqi war, America needed to pay contractors in Iraq and take money. It printed dollars in DC. This was in Wall Street Journal and also the Financial Times.
Yes.
It printed dollars, put it in a plane,
and flew.
And took it to
Baghdad.
Iraq. Hey, no other country can do that. If Nigeria wanted to pay something, let's say in Burkina Faso or in Egypt, it has to first dig up enough oil to earn the dollar with which it can trade or make international payment. But America has the ability to print its own currency. That is its status. And that power was given to America in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference or so, that the whole world said, we are going to use the dollar as the global currency and you will print it. But you know what? People were not stupid. Keynes and others were not there. If you give a country all to money, it can misuse it. So they demanded that the dollar be backed up by gold. And that's why for years, America kept gold reserves in Fort Knox. But by 1958, America has printed more dollar, run into more deficit than the gold it can ever back up. So first, it removed it even from its currency. In the past, its currency would say, this note is exchangeable for gold. America moved away. So by 1971, it was obvious to Nixon that there is no way America had the gold to back up the flooding of dollar into the international system. So that's why Nixon delinked the dollar from gold. So he cannot ask America to pay you in gold, even though that was the original agreement at the Bretton Woods. But no power was big enough to challenge America when it could just issue paper. And it was also in the same year that Nixon allowed Wall Street to be deregulated, so that the whole world will go into some kind of deregulation and removed the any requirement for America to manage what happens to you or the destruction that was coming to you. Everything was deregulated. All these moves from Nixon now to Trump, they're all calculated to sustain
the American
dollar
empire. All right. So I want you to take these last two questions. I think we have just about 5 minutes left, yes. But I'm going to put them together. The first one that I want you to focus on is, what should Nigeria be doing? How should Nigeria be responding to this, considering the fact that the Americans are interested in us, clearly, and our behavior, especially our friendship, particularly with our relationship, increasing relationship with the Chinese, and of course, to a less extent, the French. How should the president and the Nigerian government, how should we read the situation? What kind of plan should we have? And then if you have a time, what is the better global currency and trading system that can be fair to everyone? Prof.
Okay, so briefly, first, my surprise that oftentimes when you talk to central bankers in Nigeria also, there is not much depth of understanding about the global financial market in this in the way it is connected with empire and maintaining empires, right? I've not seen great understanding, the depth of understanding that will enable the country to prepare for this transition that is about to happen, and the military and the economic things that will come with it. Because anytime there is a transition of power from one major currency to other, if it's not managed, it often leads to war. And so, are we prepared for a massive economic dislocation? So that is one. But in my 2008 book, I clearly stated what I call a denationalized currency that the world, and I want the West to say, let us think about a denationalized currency for global trade before China steps in and take over. Because, and I went back and I reviewed the plan, what they call the Banco plan. John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, who was the main person advising Britain, and who were the architect behind the Bretton Woods system. Bretton Woods is in New Hampshire in America. When they met in 1944, he knew the power of a global currency and how Britain have used that privilege to dominate everybody. And he did not want to America to have that power. So first, he convinced Roosevelt to say, let them have a denationalized currency, and President Roosevelt didn't understand, I guess, what probably the Nigerian president or doesn't understand, agreed to that plan. And Harry White, the Assistant Treasury Secretary in 1944, went to Roosevelt and I'm paraphrasing that, are you crazy? We are going to just inherit the currency and dominate the world with our money, and you just gave it out. So Nixon,
Roosevelt
changed his mind. But by then, Keynes have written the old plan called the Banco Plan. So in my book, I went back to the Banco Plan and I updated it in a way that it will benefit the world and Africa in particular, at least non-dollar economies, in addition to America, to say, this is the time, the West, you've dominated this thing for 500 years, let us have a denationalized currency. And I laid out the plan, improving on what Keynes have done in 1940. It's in the libraries. His book it's called the Banco Plan.
Yeah. So in 1 minute, Prof, what is the gist of that Banco Plan? What's the gist in 1 minute as we are closing?
Yeah. The gist of the Banco Plan, that will be a currency that will not be issued by a global agent, not by any country, and with that currency, if you run unnecessary trade surplus against other countries, you'll be penalized. So it would have penalized China, and because he knew that the rise of a new power is always, the first sign is accumulation of massive trade surplus.
Yeah, and who will be in charge of that denationalized currency? Who will be in charge of it?
Yeah, it was going to be a global body that will. Of course, America didn't want that. It killed that. And what they came up was a simulacrum. Even that's why they opened the IMF. But that's what IMF was not supposed to do. They now came up with a halfway measure of the IMF, and with this SDR, the special drawing rights. Yeah, okay. But that is not the full intention.
It's not the solution. I want you to specifically address President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What should he do in your view? I mean, Prof, you have extensive knowledge about this. Can you advise the Nigerian president in 1 minute how we should go forward with all these dynamics?
So what President Bola Ahmed Tinubu needs to do is to set up a think tank that will begin to map out how Nigeria fits within this game that is going on, and how best to protect our interests. How do you want to tilt? Is it towards China, the rising power, or towards America, a dying power that is very dangerous, that can cause havoc? We need to think through all these things, both from an economic point of view and from a diplomatic point of view. But above all, how do we put our economic house in order so we have the resources or the economy to give us some independence, some breathing space? But as long as our economy is started and we are corrupt and we're not doing all these things, the whole system is at risk. But in the meantime, they should be very careful with Trump, because he will use every excuse to discipline Nigeria or any country that wants to sway or move out of the dollar zone or the dollar dominance.
Thank you so much, Professor Wariboko. We will have to come to this discussion as we go forward, especially going into more details of the specifics of what Nigeria ought to do in this very interesting global dynamics that we are witnessing. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Right. Welcome back to Inside Sources. In this segment, I want to talk with young Nigerians to give us what their perspective is for last year and to show us what is the face of our future looking like. To join me in that important conversation, I'd like to bring back two of my guests who were with me about the same time last year. To my far right, I have Mr. Khalil Ajibola, who is doing his master's program in IT, that is information technology. Khalil, welcome back to Inside Sources.
Nice being here, sir.
All right. And on my immediate right, I have Ibrahim Guzo, who is also doing his master's program in mechatronics. That's a mix, a putting together of mechanical and electronics engineering, if I'm right, Ibrahim.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right, excellent. So let's start with Ibrahim. Ibrahim, I know that you are actually doing your master's program in the United States. What do you think about what just happened in the country? You have the Americans, helping the Nigerian government working together to go after the terrorists. What do you think?
I think it's a complicated issue that could either be really good or also have a lot of problems, depending on how it's gone about. I think if our government is able to adequately work with the American government, then we could hopefully have some better situations in the north of Nigeria. However, at the same time, there are obviously worries about exploitation in the country and other issues that we can run into when working with the Western world and how they view our country.
Okay, excellent. What about you, Khalil? What do you think? Same question.
Yeah, we accept their challenges, but we welcome all assistance from all parts of the world in order to solve the problem. When you have a problem, generally, you set solutions majorly, and with the solutions, we can then hope to see better results. So we welcome more collaboration between the Nigerian government and, of course, global partners in order to completely solve the security crisis all over the country.
So both of you guys think that, it's okay, the Americans can help us, it's generally a fine thing.
Yeah, we welcome the collaboration.
I think it can turn out fine depending on how our government handles this.
What specifically do you think the government shouldn't do or should do, since you have that, condition? What can go wrong?
I think that a lot of the issues over there could be solved with adequate leadership, especially of our military. So I feel like if our country makes sure to take control and also stay in control of the issue, so that it's not every time we need help in the country, we have to call another country to help us, but we can handle our own issues on our own with our own military. So I think if we work in collaboration and have it in a situation where it's not collecting a fish from the fishermen, but learning how to fish on our own, then I think it could be a great situation.
Okay, what do you think about that too?
So for me, I think the best way it can happen is for the government to do better in terms of communicating the collaboration between us and the US, because that is what most people are afraid of. People are afraid of how they perceive the US influence in Nigeria. So the government needs to do better in communicating how it is to actually resolve the security situation.
All right, excellent. Let's move on. I actually brought you back because I want us to continue the conversation that we started last year or at the beginning of this year about the future of our country. So how do you guys, what's your assessment of what has happened in our country since the last time we had the conversation? I'm sure that you guys keep up with the news. Let's start with you, Ibrahim.
The last time I was here was exactly a year ago when I was on your show. And since coming here since then, one of the largest things I've seen improve is the private sector in Nigeria. There are now companies like OPay and MoneyPoint and a lot more e-commerce, a larger e-commerce industry in Nigeria. And I think that's a really great way to further develop the country. Being able to rely on the private sector, apart from just relying on the government as well, can increase the amount of jobs we have, and it also increases more power to the people. So I think that's a really great area that's been developing since my last time here, which I hope to see continue more.
Okay, that's interesting because, it turns out that I think if you put OPay and MoneyPoint together, for instance, they seem to even be stronger than some of the banks. Do you think that necessarily is a good thing?
Incredibly. I think competition is the greatest way to have a proper private sector. So the more companies are fighting for that competition, the more they'll have to do what's best for the customers and the consumers and the citizens, so that's not one or two companies controlling the entire industry and being able to do whatever they want. But if you have a large number of different people, divided power, none of them can have too much power, and they have to do what's right. So I think it's a great thing.
Excellent. Khalil, what's your take?
So the last time we majorly talked about food inflation, and the inflation around the country then was around 28%. And we can see that there is a gradual decrease to around 14%. So we welcome more efforts in order to reduce food inflation generally in the country. So if we can see that more next year, but already this year we saw a gradual decrease in commodity prices in different sectors. So that's one. The second level is government spending. Government didn't do. There were some challenges in the budget, but the new budget for 2026 was a bit more conservative, and we did more conservative estimates. We do see better government efficiency in government spending, because throughout the year we usually saw, as I said, we usually saw growth in the economy through private spending and private sector. So of course, with the new tax law coming into place by January 1, 2026, we expect the private sector to also grow faster, because they'll be having lower CIT and lower, and there's generally more incentives for the private sector to actually do much better, especially medium to large scale organizations.
So you think the new reform, tax reform laws, you think is essentially a good thing?
Yes. Any educated person that reads through it will see that it actually has more benefits for organizations, who then end up hiring young people into the organizations.
Okay. Ibrahim, what do you think about the new tax reforms?
I haven't read up too much on the tax reform, so I'd have to see all the details to it, but I think it could be a great tax reform if all of the subsidies from it and all the places where it's spent, it's all going to the right places. Then I think it could be incredibly beneficial. It's being used for infrastructure, for subsidizing the proper industries to allow them to grow, then it can end up good. But I'd have to read up more on it to see the exact details.
All right. So what I want to do now is that, I want you guys to, in your own assessment, what are the big ticket issues of the last 1 year, in your view, in the country, whatever it is? Is it the politics? Is it the economy, business, whatever it is? I want both of you to just tell us one thing that you think that was the big ticket issue last year. Okay, you guys need a minute to think about that. Or maybe even one or two. Who wants to start?
Okay, it's fine. For me, majorly two things: economy and security. For economy, as I said earlier, we see the inflation numbers are going down, which is actually what will benefit the masses. Because we even if we tell someone that Nigeria is growing by 4%, people were like, oh, but we are not seeing the effect. So of course, inflation was a very big topic, because a lot of people initially were against the numbers, saying that, oh, they changed the base year of the inflation for the inflation targeting, the way they were calculating the inflation targeting, that they changed the base year. But we've seen a drop generally, and that's the first thing about the economy. Second is security. Of course, we need Nigeria to be more secure. Everyone knows that. So of course, these issues of foreign help, foreign assistance, people are talking so much about it. So of course, better communication about that needs to be done. So generally, if we have increased security in the country, it will help increase the economy. So basically, those are the two major big ticket issues I see. Basically, the economy and of course, security.
Okay.
For politics, politicians always play politics, so they'll be fine.
I like that. The politicians will be fine. Ibrahim, what do you think?
Going off of that, I'd agree both of those are also the largest for the past year. I'd also add education to that. I feel like if we have a structured education and a good foundation for education in our country, we can go a lot further. If all of our students, the people go into politics, they all know what they're doing and they have the proper education and they know how bad things can be harmful and what good things are that could increase the country. I think education would be something that could propel us into prosperity in the country. And economy, of course, is definitely a really large thing. The more we can improve our own economy and increase our exports to other countries, for example, with Dangote now working on his oil refineries, then we can increase our economy by a lot and not be too reliant on other countries. Since once we get self-sufficiency, things like our inflation won't even be as big of an issue as they are now, since we won't have to compare everything to the dollar or to the pound or to the euro. So those are definitely the largest issues for our country right now.
Okay, all right. So I have two important issues that I try to push, and I do it quite a bit with my guests. I want to do it with both of you guys. I've noticed two things. Number one, poverty in Nigeria is very, very alarming. And then the corruption, the level of corruption is also very disturbing. Now, what do you guys think about these two issues, poverty and corruption? Let's start with you, Khalid.
So in terms of poverty, the basic way we can actually reduce poverty numbers in the country is for the economy to grow faster, because the size of the Nigerian economy is small in comparison to its population. So we generally have a lower GDP per capita, and generally people will be poor. So in order to actually reduce poverty, we need to put hands all on deck to increase the size of the economy. So we should be growing much faster as a country, probably close to double digits. So for corruption, of course, there need to be generally more reforms, especially into the fiscal reforms. Part of the committee for tax headed by Mr. Taiwo. Also, part of the things they are working on is fiscal reform. So generally, we need more fiscal reforms in public spending in Nigeria. So we need like these reforms will be majorly on two things: accountability and systems in which this money can be spent efficiently. So of course there are already some, but of course we generally need more improvement, because when this accountability, when we can show this accountability in spending, that's when Nigerians can truly believe in government programs. Because for now, Nigerians are not believing in what government is, and it all stands down to accountability.
Interesting point. Ibrahim.
In terms of poverty, I would go back to education and saying that if that were improved in the country and gone even further, then we could have a lot less poverty-stricken people in the country, and not just sending them to secondary school, primary school, but also changing the entire structure of the way our education works, where it's not just a matter of someone learning a skill that might not be helpful for them. For example, if you're in specific regions that are in droughts or don't have water, further maths or subjects like those, they may be helpful to you, but for the most part, it'll be incredibly important for you to learn ways where you can improve irrigation systems and maybe, for example, farming, ways to do it with less water, and stuff that will be specific to regions that are poverty-stricken, and other skills like the trades. Trades would be incredibly important if they were all structured and people were able to learn them properly and go about having proper electricians, having a trade union for them, and going further in that way for education. I think that would be incredibly great with helping poverty. Of course, economy is also a really big thing for that, but education is something that I feel like is overlooked when it comes to poverty, and just the restructuring of that, I feel like could change a lot of things.
Okay.
And then in terms of corruption, I feel like education would also be a part of that, not just the civic education where you kind of like learn the list of all the things that it could cause, but actually having it so that the curriculum for that is structured in a way that shows you the real harmful effects, and every student is touched with the way they see the downsides of corruption, and they're going to reach the point where they're not even going to want to be corrupt, and they're going to see the benefits of a society without corruption. I also feel the judiciary is really important for stopping corruption, where no crime is too small and everything is structured so that anyone, no matter how small you are or how big you are, can take something to court and be able to see something get out of that. Recently, I saw a story in Nigeria of one of the larger banks that had debited someone for, I believe it was 1,000 naira, despite them not being deserving of that debit. And they took it to court, and eventually what ended up happening was, after appealing it, they got a reversal for their 1,000 naira. But what should really happen is the bank should be held accountable to that for either more quantity or more fines or maybe more restrictions, because just returning the 1,000 naira that wasn't deserving. Exactly, after all the trouble as well. And if they start seeing larger fines and larger issues, they're going to stop taking money from their customers. And that's just like one example. Then a larger scale could benefit all of Nigeria.
Okay, excellent point. I want you guys to tell us what you have done in the last 1 year. What are you doing and all of that? Give us an update.
So in the past year, I've continued with research that I mentioned last time I was on your show about using piezoelectric sensors to increase prosthetics and how they work so they're more realistic and you're actually able to feel with them, and they feed that back to the nerves. So people who have prosthetics, it's not just a matter of functionality, but it also gives them like actual use, and they can actually feel like it's an actual arm, which can motivate them more in life. And I've been working on that. I published a paper recently with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, and the end goal for that is currently I'm working on trying to get human subjects, and once it goes further, hopefully be able to use that more in Nigeria, where going over the poverty and the security, where a lot of people who don't have certain limbs or they're disabled will be able to use these prosthetics and continue to live a quote unquote normal life and be able to get easier jobs easier.
So the one of the highlights of this, your research, is that the prosthetics will communicate more with the nerves. Is that what you're trying to say?
So, for example, if I have the prosthetic, if I touch this table, you'll actually feel it in your nerves. You'll feel the texture, how hard you're pushing down on it, which can also help you be able to have more dexterity with all the fingers and do a lot more different tasks.
So how do you guys intend to do that?
So currently, the piezoelectric sensor, that's what's going to be reading all the forces and seeing the frequency of all the bumps to be able to get that information.
Wow.
That's what our paper was mainly about, trying to make that cheap so anyone can afford it, and not that's $10,000 or 100 million naira per prosthetic. And our main focus is trying to get that as cheap as possible, which we've done now. So the next steps are to finish the design for the hands itself and then interface that with the nerves of human subjects and then move from there.
Wow, interesting. Thank you so much. Khalil.
Yeah, so for me, we are running a cybersecurity consulting firm in which we consult for medium to small organizations on how to improve their cybersecurity posture. So we work with them in terms of governance, regulation, and compliance, for them to be compliant in how they handle their data, or their organization's data, or their customer data. So yeah, basically that's also working on a research to, especially in Nigeria, on how to protect people from cyber crimes.
Okay.
Because we see a lot of cyber, especially in the financial space.
Right.
And a lot of times these cases are not usually like pursued to solution. And also about the phone thefts and laptop thefts around the country. Because we see cases about, because we do forensics, digital forensics, and we find cases in which people get their phone stolen in Abuja, and before they know it, the phone is in Kano or is in Kaduna. So yeah, we are working on that and how to actually find ways to solve this, to reduce these issues, especially in the Nigerian context.
Excellent. Thank you guys for coming back to Inside Sources, and thank you for the promises that you guys offer the country. And I'm excited by some of the stuff that you guys are doing. And I say Merry Christmas, compliment of the season, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you.
All right. And there you have it, another edition of Inside Sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means Nigeria will win. Thank you for watching. My name is Laolu Akonde. And by the grace of God, I'll see you again next edition. Happy New Year.